Hello and welcome to another edition of Inside Cottonwood. I am Ron Corbin, Cottonwood City Manager. We are lucky. We have some very neat guests and a couple neat people too. So let's go ahead and get started. We have Commander Makuch, Cottonwood Police Department.
Yes, sir. Welcome.
How are you doing this morning?
Great.
Doing great.
Good, very good. And we have Sergeant Dowell. How are you doing this morning, Sergeant?
Good, sir.
Well, why don't you introduce our special guest this morning?
This is Canine Kratos. He is a Belgian Malinois. He is a patrol dog and a narcotics detection dog. And he likes attention.
And he does like attention, doesn't he? He looks much nicer in person than I've seen him when he's working. He seems to enjoy his handler quite a bit there. Does he always need this much attention?
Yes, he is a little bit needy like this. Here, off.
So off. You said off. What kind of word is off? Is it?
Off means down.
Okay. German then, I'm guessing.
It is.
Or Dutch?
Dutch.
Dutch. Very good. Well, I'm glad you brought him with us today. So our topic today is talking about some of the resources that our police department have here in Cottonwood, and we are very fortunate enough for a community our size to have this kind of resource. So why don't you talk us, Sergeant Dowell, a little bit about the dog there, your canine, and what he provides to Cottonwood.
Again, Kratos is a patrol dog. On the patrol side of the house, he is a force multiplier. Basically, he can do building searches. He does a lot of deterrent work. So if we're taking a suspect into custody, his presence alone will stop people from fighting. In fact, we've kind of seen, we see a downtick in uses of force from police officers when the dog's around, because people tend not to want to fight us with the dog. He also helps with building searches. He can help us track people through fields. He can find evidence items. We call those article searches. He also does narcotics work. And with that, he's an aggressive alerting narcotics dog. So when he finds something, he bites and scratches and barks. So
one of the things that we worry about is officer safety. Everything we can do to keep officers from having to lay hands on and get in a fight or use a deadly weapon or a less than lethal weapon is a good thing. So having the dog there actually de-escalates the situation normally with bad guys?
Yes. Yes, we've seen quite a bit of it lately. We've had some people who were less than happy to see us. We were taking them into custody for various crimes. And once the dog showed up, they became less physically resistive. They still became, verbally resistant, but
right.
That's part of the game. But we've seen a good de-escalation with him. So
the neat part for me is that our police officers are safer having him on the force, but then our community is safer. So we have less, we're laying physically getting rough, deadly weapons, less than deadly weapons that we're using on the bad guys. So we're taking them into custody and they end up being safer as well.
Yes.
Well, I don't know how that's a bad thing. Now, I didn't realize he also helps you find people. When you said building searches and field searches, is that to help find people also?
Yes. The other night we had to search a very large medical building, had an open door. There was only 2 of us on the shift at the time. I was able to deploy him inside the room. When he searches a building, when he finds the odor of a person who's hiding, he bites and scratches and alerts us to that. If the suspect is out in the open after a couple announcements, then he may be apprehended by Kratos. But when you have a large medical building or other type of building, it's really hard to effectively search something with only 2 or 3 officers.
Right.
And again, he's a force multiplier with that, so he really helps us with that. And it makes us a lot safer.
Absolutely. The dog can go in there and find him, and so you know what's behind the closed doors.
Yes.
So you also said narcotics. So what kind of drugs does Kratos help you find?
He's certified in cocaine, methamphetamine, heroin, and marijuana.
So all around canine there protects you, protects the community, and helps us find drugs and get them off the streets.
Yes.
So what kind of successes have you had recently with your canine?
We've had a really great first half of the year. A lot of that, good boy, off. I attribute to him. He's a very good narcotics dog, and
he knocked your microphone. He wants to talk.
It also has to do with the relationships that we've built with the other agencies in the Valley and the officers. So through the networking and through the intelligence that we get from Pant and our other patrol uniform guys out there, we've really kicked up the success rate with our narcotics finds lately.
So we're getting the drugs off the streets at a higher rate. Well, that's awesome. You mentioned Pant. Maybe, Commander, you can tell us a little bit about that. What is Pant, and what does that do for the Verde Valley?
So Pant is a multi-jurisdictional agencies Partners Against Narcotics Trafficking. So it's a group of detectives that work together, and primarily their job is to work narcotics cases, and they work regionally within the county. So we all work together, and many of us often many agencies participate by providing a detective or two to help out with that. So it's primarily led by the Sheriff's Office.
Okay. So the Sheriff's running the show, and we provide some resources, and of course we have Kratos to help out.
Right.
And then I'm assuming Sedona, Camp Verde, those folks also help out?
The Prescott Valley, Prescott, Chino Valley, all sides of the Yavapai County. Well, that's great.
That's good news that we have that many resources working together to keep our citizens safe. Very good. So we've talked a little bit about some of the successes he's had, and so when we talk about Cottonwood, we have about 12,000 residents. Most of our tax base is off sales tax. I consider it quite fortunate that we can have a K9. Is it normal, Sergeant? You came from a bigger agency and moved up here not too long ago and are part of our community. Were you surprised to find that we had a K9, and do you think it's worth the investment for our community to have a K9 in our work police department?
I wasn't surprised to see that we had a K9 within the department. They're a very good resource. They're a force multiplier, especially with an agency of this size. You get your bang for your buck with an agency this size and a K9. It's a great resource. It not only helps us with the patrol side, but it also helps us with the community. People love the dog.
They do.
They don't always necessarily like the police, but when he shows up, it tends to build bridges. It tends to help us build those relationships with the community that we need sometimes. And so if for nothing else, it helps with those. It helps us with those relationships, which is very, very important.
Very, very important. So when you talk about relationships, de-escalation lowers attention sometimes when the dog's there and they know they're going to have to surrender. But schools, does he get to go to school very often?
Yes. I'm in close contact with the principals. The principals ask us to come in at times, provides a deterrent for maybe contraband coming in. It also helps it. Maybe if somebody was thinking about doing something nefarious at the school, they see the K9 at the school on occasion and they think, oh, maybe this isn't a soft target. Maybe this is something that I should reconsider. So it helps us with that also. So it's not necessarily something that's easy for somebody who had bad intentions.
Well, I think that anything we do to keep our kids safe and anything that adds another layer of protection to our schools is a good thing. Well, I guess we're going to let you put him up for a little bit, and we'll come back and we'll talk Commander. But anything else you want to say or let the community know about Kratos and the great work that he's done? I noticed in the last 6 months the apprehensions and the discoveries has just off the charts. So anything else you want to let the community know about this beautiful dog that doesn't look a bit dangerous sitting here rolling around on his back? I know the camera can't necessarily see him, but he just looks like a big puppy. Anything you want to add?
Well, he provides resources for all the different agencies throughout the Verde Valley, so it's not just the city of Cottonwood. We respond quite frequently to the other agencies around us, and with that, he's a community resource, not just a city of Cottonwood resource. And we have some great sponsors out there. We have Olson's Grain, who provides his food on a monthly basis, and we get a grant every year from Arizona Community Foundation.
Awesome. All right, well, when we get back, we're going to talk to the commander about those resources. You talked about our partnerships with our other Verde Valley cities and the county and the sheriff's office. So we're going to go into a little more detail. We'll let you guys take a quick break. And when we be back, we'll be talking about the Verde Valley and law enforcement.
This is Bruce Marrow, Transportation Manager for Cottonwood Area Transit. Remember, we cover the entire Verde Valley and Sedona. Cottonwood Area Transit has you covered wherever you want to ride in the Verde Valley, all day, every day. Take Cottonwood Area Transit through Clarkdale, Verde Village, and from 26 locations in Cottonwood. With Verde Links, it's a quick and easy trip to Sedona every day. Don't forget our connectors to Camp Verde. Visit cottonwoodaz.gov for Cottonwood Area Transit and take a seat. Let's go ride.
There are people who struggle with addiction and homelessness. Sometimes it may feel like there is nothing we can do to help.
But there is. You can make a tax-deductible donation and help those in need transition away from homelessness. When you give someone a handout, you could actually be supporting an addiction.
A better life starts with better health, especially for those living in the streets.
Support solutions, not addictions. You can make a difference. Visit cottonwoodcares.org.
Welcome back. This is Inside Cottonwood. I'm Ron Corbin, Cottonwood City Manager, and today we have some wonderful guests from our Cottonwood Police Department. Commander Makuch, how are you doing?
I'm doing great.
Good. So we talked about the K9 program. We talked about protecting our community and our schools. You had mentioned Pant, one of the partnerships that we have with the Sheriff's Office and our other law enforcement agencies that sounded like they're tasked with narcotics interdiction, stopping the flow of narcotics in our community. How effective has Pant been in Yavapai County?
They're very effective because they can specialize in just the narcotics trafficking and work on cases that are quite lengthy. So it takes a lot of time and investment into investigations, and most of the small agencies don't have the resources to dedicate the patrol staff or detectives just to narcotics, and the length of time that it takes to build successive cases and to have a good prosecution when we finally do arrest these folks.
Right, prosecution's the important part. It doesn't do any good if you just catch a couple bad guys. You got to really build the case so that we win in court. Getting them off the street is the most important thing. And so, well, I'm very appreciative of that. We also talked briefly with Sergeant Dowell about schools. And I believe Cottonwood Police Department is very dedicated to our local community and to our schools. What kinds of partnerships do we have with our schools?
So we've had the School Resource Officer Grant in partnership with Dominguez Union High School over I believe this is the 4th year. There was a hiatus where they didn't get grant funding for a few years, and during that time the police department still participated with events at the high school, and we tried to have officers there as much as we could. Before that, I've been here since 2000, and we've had an SRO at Mingus since I started, aside from those few years where funding was a little tight.
20 years.
Yes, sir.
That's a long time. Well, we appreciate your service and dedication to our community. So do we do anything with the elementary school or middle schools with Cottonwood Oak Creek? Do we have anything going on ever with them? Do we partner with them at all?
Yes, we do. And for several years, Cottonwood Oak Creek had also had the School Resource Officer Grant. And then there was a time where the funding got a little tight and they didn't get funded for their School Resource Officer. So in the interim, we had School Safety Officer, when staffing allowed, that would go visit the Cottonwood Oak Creek School District, and we also tasked them with going around to the private schools and the church schools that were in the community to make contact with them, help them with emergency plans, and provide some training to the students, and so that the children could get some exposure to law enforcement to see that it's not always about enforcement.
Well, I think it's very important that young children see police officers in uniform in a positive light, as a role model, as a partner. You know, these days we've had Chief Gazelle on here before, and we've talked about the modern role of policing, and being a counselor is part of that. You know, you show up, and now we're fortunate to have another partnership with Spectrum Healthcare that really helps. But, you know, building those relationships with young children, I think, creates long-term community. We off break or before the show started, you said something that made me think that you've been an SRO before.
No, sir. No,
okay.
I've not.
But have you had the chance to work in schools and build some of those relationships with young kids?
So I've attended several of the details where the sporting events, or I've assisted with investigations at the school with the school resource officers.
Okay.
Another thing that happens quite frequently is when we'll be on a call, and if during the summer months when school's not in session, the school resource officer works with patrol and he's back out on the street. And I couldn't count the number of times where we've been on a scene where, or just out in public, where students or adults who were students come up and be like, hey, you were my school resource officer. And just those relationships are certainly lasting and fruitful.
And very, very important later on in life. Well, that's awesome. So our police department is fortunate enough to also have a regional communication system department, our comm building there in the public safety area. So do I understand it correctly that we actually, even with our resources, provide dispatch and communications for other agencies in the area?
Yes, we have the Regional Communications Center, and we dispatch for our police department, and then we dispatch for the fire agencies in the Verde Valley. So we have, and forgive me if I forget one, because there's several. We have Jerome Fire, Verde Valley Fire, Copper Canyon Fire, Sedona Fire, and Cottonwood Fire.
Well, that's a pretty big department for Cottonwood. Well, one of the other partnerships that I wanted to talk about, again, I think that Cottonwood is fortunate enough to be the hub for the Verde Valley on a lot of things and providing leadership and partnerships. And Spectrum Healthcare is one of those partners that I wish every community had, and I've come from a couple different ones. Is there anything you want to say about Spectrum and maybe a plug for them and give them a quick thank you for their partnerships that they provided with us?
Absolutely. So Spectrum's counseling services and their response team that comes out to the scenes when someone's in crisis has been a great asset for us in our community. Years ago, law enforcement didn't really know how to handle some of these situations that great, and we weren't trained counselors, but we do the best that we can to provide that guidance and give people the assistance that they need when they might be in crisis. So having Spectrum have a response team that can come out and help us with those folks in crisis has been phenomenal. It frees up the police officer to get back out on the street to do other tasks that need to be done, and it provides the right resource for the right people.
Well, not everybody has to be arrested just because they've had an interaction with a police officer. Sometimes they really do need some help with a counselor or otherwise, and it's nice to have that resource. Now, are they always available to you, or are they only in special moments? How firm is that relationship with Spectrum Healthcare?
They're fantastic. They're 24/7. They have a hotline number that the public is aware of as well, and then they have one for law enforcement that we can call and contact them. We brief them on what we're handling at the particular time, and often they are familiar with the patient, and then they can show up and they can provide the assistance that's necessary, implement a safety plan for the person that might be in crisis, and give them the help that they need.
Well, it really sounds like full service to me. You just said something I hadn't picked up on, and that's continuity of care. Now, we don't always think about that in policing, but when you have a citizen that you encounter on a regular basis, to have a counselor that also interacts with him on a regular basis, so they don't have to start over. You know, sometimes getting that relationship so they trust you to give you the information or to listen or to follow instructions. Relationships matter, and if you're able to get a partner with a mental health provider that also knows that citizen, I can't imagine that that's not worth its weight in gold.
It absolutely is, and I can tell you from my early years in law enforcement, where those folks that might be in crisis, they have to tell their story, over and over to folks and let them know where they're at to try to get the assistance. And many times I felt like sometimes they didn't get the care that they needed. So continuity care is absolutely important for the people to know what's working with those folks and how they can help them best.
Okay. Well, again, we're here talking with Cottonwood PD. When we come back, we'll bring Sergeant Dowell back in. Hopefully, Kratos has been put away and safely in his vehicle. That is one happy dog. But when we come back, we'll follow up with Sergeant Dowell. Again, this edition of Inside Cottonwood.
This is Bruce Marrow, Transportation Manager for Cottonwood Area Transit. Remember, we cover the entire Verde Valley and Sedona. Cottonwood Area Transit has you covered wherever you want to ride in the Verde Valley, all day, every day. Take Cottonwood Area Transit through Clarkdale, Verde Village, and from 26 locations in Cottonwood. With Verde Links, it's a quick and easy trip to Sedona every day. Don't forget our connectors to Camp Verde. Visit cottonwoodaz.gov for Cottonwood Area Transit and take a seat. Let's go ride.
There are people who struggle with addiction and homelessness. Sometimes it may feel like there is nothing we can do to help.
But there is. You can make a tax-deductible donation and help those in need transition away from homelessness. When you give someone a handout, you could actually be supporting an addiction.
A better life starts with better health, especially for those living in the streets.
Support solutions, not addictions. You can make a difference. Visit cottonwoodcares.org.
Welcome back to another edition of Inside Cottonwood. I'm Ron Corbin, Cottonwood City Manager, and we have Commander Makuch, Sergeant Dowell. Thank you guys for joining us. Now, you put Kratos away, your canine. Where is that at? Where do you have to sneak him off to?
He has a compartment in my truck. It's air conditioned. He actually enjoys being in the truck more than he enjoys being anywhere else. That's his happy spot, so his little cave.
So it's air conditioned, so it's real safe.
Yes.
Okay, well that's good to know. So, Sergeant, now let's talk about you for a little bit. Having some experience with canine handlers, the handler can make the difference. So dogs have different levels of energy and drive, but the handler really makes a difference. How long have you been in law enforcement? How long have you been here? And you know, knowing when to deploy the dog is just as important as having the dog in the truck. So why don't you talk a little bit about yourself for a second?
I've been in law enforcement now for about 23 years. Came from a larger agency in the Valley. I've been here about 3. It's very refreshing. This is a nice, enjoyable community to where it's different than the rat race of the Valley. I'll say that from my perspective, usually you don't see people with 23 years on taking on the canine. It just kind of came up about 8 months ago, kind of fell in my lap. I'm enjoying it. It takes quite a bit of commitment. It's not uncommon for me to be covered in dog hair and dirt and that, so that's something that when you talk to people about being a canine handler, you're like, listen, this isn't like one of those you're always clean kind of things. You're always in the dirt. You're always in the weeds. I spend more time with the dog than I do the family at times, and it's really a hard balance sometimes because the dog I spend at least 40 to 60 hours a week with the dog, and that's a bond that you can't break because of all the time you spend. And so when it comes to balancing that with the family life, sometimes it can be a little challenging.
The dog's with you a lot. I know that in Cottonwood we don't always have partners riding together, but you always have your partner riding with you there in your vehicle. So
yes.
That's very neat. So you've been with Cottonwood about 3 years, and I heard you say you liked it quite a bit, so we're glad you decided to join us. So certainly, for me, having the police officers in our community and interacting with citizens. So community policing, in my opinion, is very important because I think the better the trust between police officers and the community, the better the community is. So what do you think about the relationship with our community? Either schools is the best example that I can think of. I think that kids that grow up with police officers in a positive light respect police officers and have a lot less trouble in life later on. So what are your thoughts about Cottonwood and our community and the police department?
Well, again, coming from the Valley, this is a different type of community connection. Here, you know the community. In fact, it's not uncommon to come across people that you arrest on a weekly basis or people that are in crisis on a daily basis that you deal with quite often, and it's there's a nice uniqueness to that because it's a small town community, and you really feel connected here comparative to living down there. I think it's very important, especially up here in this small community, that we have those relationships and that we grow them. I know coming from the Valley, I participated in the Explorer or the Cadet program when I was young, and I think it probably pushed me to be where I am. We have the same kind of program here, which is run out of the high school. Officer Combs runs it as the SRO there, and I think we have a lot of positive impacts from that. We have kids that say, I don't want to be a police officer when I get older, but I like doing it. I like the leadership part of it, and I like the mentorship, and that's what we're there for. It's not necessarily to teach kids to be cops, it's to teach them to be leaders, to mentor them, to keep them on the right track, and sometimes just to keep them out of trouble. We're spending time with them so they're not out doing things that they shouldn't be doing. So it's those things. It's not just us teaching them to be police officers. It's us teaching them the life skills so that when they leave us, they're better prepared for the world.
Well, I think those are great goals. I think we need more of those kinds of role models in our community. So you hit on the one of the last things I think we'll talk about before we run out of time here, and that is becoming a police officer. So we're always hiring police officers, and I think almost every agency in the state and probably beyond have been hiring, and it's been that way in policing for probably 5+ years, where we've just needed more police officers. After the downturn, Maricopa started hiring, Phoenix started hiring, DPS, the state agency, started hiring, and often they took from smaller communities like Cottonwood. So why would anybody want to be a police officer? And we'll end with you, Commander, with that. But Sergeant, why policing? Why choose that as a career, given the world we live in today?
We have a obligation. I believe I have an obligation to do my part for the community, and that's how I fulfill that obligation. Other people do it other ways. This is how I feel my obligation to the community and the people that I live with.
So why policing though? Why? What kind of, is it, do you make a difference? Is it an easy paycheck? Why policing? You can't be a police officer, I don't think, today without having that obligation of feeling like you need to get back to the community. I think policing today is very stressful and very hard and sometimes unthankful. So I guess I'm going to push back a little bit. Why policing? Because I want to see more young men and women join the forces. There's a need, and we need good people. We need people with good hearts and a good ethical background and a strong moral compass. So why policing?
Well, again, from my perspective, I was raised in a police family. I'm a 4th-generation police officer.
I'm sorry, I just want to make sure our community heard that. A 4th generation. So it's been good for you and yours.
Yes, and that's honestly why that's why it's been a magnet for me. But I love the job, and I think the commander would attest to that because of the way I live at the PD, and again, it's just something that fills my heart.
Awesome. Well, those are the kind of police officers we need, and from the work, I've been here over a year and a half now, and your name is often at the top of projects, cases, and things getting done in our community to make it better. So Sergeant Dowell, I appreciate your service, and I'm glad you chose Cottonwood and you left Maricopa County. We're fortunate to have you. Now that's about 3 years here now. Now, Commander, I heard 20 years a minute ago, and you've been with us the whole 20 years.
Yes, sir.
So I want 2 questions for you. Why policing? Why should someone join policing? And why should they choose Cottonwood?
So for me, policing is easy. It's an exciting career. It's different every day, and it's dynamic. There's a lot going on. And there's a lot of paperwork, and there's a lot of little things we got to dot our I's and cross our T's. But any job, you have to pay special attention to the details. This job is very rewarding. exciting. It's just something that I've always wanted to do since I was young. I'm not a generational police officer, but I'm hoping that maybe my kids might follow suit someday. But we'll see. As far as Cottonwood, I love Cottonwood. This community, it's not too big and it's not too small. It has everything that you need. I've raised my family here, my wife and I, and we just love it. And I can't think of a better place as far as climate goes as well. For Arizona, I feel like it's perfect. If you want to go play in the snow, you can drive an hour north. If you want to go down and do a lot of shopping or have everything else that a big city has, it's just an hour and a half away. So I think we're situated in a very great place. The wine theme in the valley here, the river, the recreation that's outdoors. I just think that the people in the community, this is a fantastic place.
Well, I couldn't agree more about it being a wonderful community and having lots to do. Now, often people don't realize, being a small department, that we actually have lots of opportunities. So if I wanted to be a canine handler, Cottonwood is as good as any, right? I mean, we have at least one, and I think I've heard the chief talk about getting another canine. I'm probably an obstacle to that with the budget and those kinds of things. But what other kinds of opportunities? So there's patrol officer. We have Sergeant Scarum gets to ride a motorcycle. That's kind of neat for a small department. What other kinds of opportunities? And then we'll wrap up. I just looked at the clock. Our time's up. But what kind of opportunities do you have in policing here in Cottonwood?
So we have the school resource officer, which we mentioned earlier. We have bicycle officers. It's not a full-time assignment, but it's an ancillary duty that they can do. We have the K9. We have the motor program, and then we have investigations. We typically have someone assisting with the Partners Against Narcotics Trafficking, and then we have participated in the state gang task force as well. So there are many opportunities for people who want to broaden their career.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, thank you both for being here today, and this is another edition of Inside Cottonwood.